Okay, so dear friends, I'm privileged to speak about Alois Rudolph, whom I know for decades, and I will try to summarize very briefly for you the view that we had here, as you know, from the side of healthcare professionals on this very important person in our environment. Firstly, just to be on the professional side, Alois completed a Bachelor in Science in Economics and Finances, was Chief Financial Officer in several mid to large companies during his life, starting with smaller and ending up with one of the biggest companies we have here, and had several executive positions in philanthropy, including but not limited to the National Disability Association board member and the National Lottery board member. So was actually active as a professional in helping associations with one or the other disability to get money for their activities. So here, initially, we see a person that is a businessman, mostly in financial world, extremely successful in his career, with mounting positions in this professional world. And then, of course, he had diabetes at the early adolescent age of 13 that came to our clinic here, to University Children's Hospital in Ljubljana, and started many years ago, of course, the therapies that we had at that time, but then joined the Slovenian Association of People with Diabetes in 1994, and very quickly became the chief financial officer of this association, and later on vice president. He never wanted to take it over, but basically stayed as a guiding force and also the motor of the activities of this association, but leaving the more visible positions to other people. And he, as you know better than I do, organized the General Assembly of IDF Europe in Slovenia in 2004 in the Castle of Otočec, and became an IDF EU board member in 2008, and an IDF EU treasurer from 2009 to 2015, and was re-elected then in 2019, and got a special recognition award from the IDF Europe in 2015. But then his activities were not limited also to this inner organization, but it's several lectures around Europe, like the one in the Lithuanian parliament to support endeavors of people with diabetes, and became an honorary member of the Slovak Association because of his help, particularly in organizing the financial part of the society. But then he was very active at home and was instrumental in the National Diabetes Strategy Plan, the first that we ever developed. We now have the third version of it. He started school competition in diabetes knowledge to promote general knowledge of diabetes and thus enable individuals with diabetes to be more reintegrated into the society, more accepted, that diabetes would lose the stigma that it had for many, many years. He participated in numerous promotional events yearly, both national and national with international participation, and basically facilitating the access to modern diabetes technology, which we will touch a little bit later on. This is his endeavor with other well-known promoters of diabetes. This is Mr. Bastian Haug from the German force, if you want, online force, the DEDOC community that those of you that use Twitter probably know very well. This is his Twitter name, and he is instrumental in spreading the importance of involvement of people with diabetes into the process of decision making. And here is at a meeting, like offering kilometers, a very successful project that brought money to the Diabetes Association. Here with the Novo Nordisk cycling team, as you can see here, one of the most famous cyclists and the coach at a national event. And here with another world famous person with diabetes, and of course, a well-known diabetologist from Finland, working together as advocates of people with diabetes. And here with our current president, Mr. Graton, and his wife, Spilza, who really supported all his work throughout his life in a very efficient and instrumental way. In addition to all this, he was a father and a loving husband in his family with wife Spilza and with his son Yuri and daughter Angelica, all in this photo. Luckily, all of them adult at the moment. Finally, we have to thank him for many other things that I cannot mention in this brief presentation. Simply to say thank you, Alois. We loved you and we deeply miss you. It was sudden, it was obviously unexpected. And I believe that due to the real cause of his demise, tragic in many ways, signaling that we need to do more with all the experience that we got working with you. With this, allow me to say that in his endeavor to improve the situation of people with diabetes, I would like to remind you on this important study from the UK Biobank. 1/3 of a million of people were included. They did not have diabetes, and they were actually genotyped for 40 genetic variants that are related to chronic heart disease. And what the study identified, and please, I believe this is really important, is that even with people without diabetes, again, 1/3 of a million, if you have a low glycated hemoglobin versus a higher glycated hemoglobin, both of them being within the normal range, you have a 3-fold increase in the risk of chronic heart disease. So glucose, even within the normal range, is dangerous, which has relevance, of course, or particularly to type 2 diabetes, when we know that there is a long silent phase due to lack of recognition of this disease. And in type 1, perhaps we can focus on the brain, this longitudinal study showing impaired spatial working memory in people with diabetes, adolescents, related to high glucose. In our study with a functional MRI, when acute hyperglycemia was related to impaired spatial working memory, as you can see here, normal glycemic data and hyperglycemic data, a very severe decrease in spatial working memory. And finally, the longitudinal study of 12-year follow-up from the DirectNet that showed a full-scale IQ that was diminished with type 1 diabetes in this young population, and the total brain volume that was diminished, all in relation to high glucose, percentage of sensor glucose above 180, or area under the curve above 6%. And for those that prefer cardiovascular outcomes, this recent study published online in Diabetes Care, demonstrating that in ST-elevated myocardial infarction, glucose is a very important predictor of the restenosis of the stent. And finally, again, this biobank with, in this case, 10,000 people with diabetes and 77,000 controls, showing that if you miss more here, more in this particular level, more than 4 factors related to type 2 diabetes, your risk for dementia increases very significantly. If you don't miss any of the targets, as you can see here, 2.5 times increase in the risk of dementia in this population. So to sum up, glucose is dangerous to the brain and to the cardiovascular system. So for this, he was very much aligned with us that we need to do better, that we need to fight to change the philosophy and to prevent all this damage that we see and describe. One thing is that our goals are important. This is a recent study recalculating that if the glycemic goals of a center are stringent, the outcome of this center is better. And this is what Alois was fighting for the whole time, stringent goals in the management of diabetes. And the technology. This is what we discussed. This is a sweet analysis, a recent publication demonstrating, contrary to the United States data, an improvement over the last 10 years. As you can see here, the green line, the A1C, is significantly and clinically meaningfully lower 10 years after the beginning of the SWEET database. And this was related to the use of technology. Finally, this recent publication from the DCCT ADDICT study, original authors David Nathan, and demonstrating in short that the first 10 years are more important than the second 10 years. To ease a little bit this, to sum up, a person with diabetes A has first 10 years A1C of 7 and the second 10 years A1C of 9, compared to a person with diabetes B who has the first 10 years an A1C of 9 and the second 10 years an A1C of 7. So theoretically, same average glycemic exposure over the 20 years. Yet, from this study, this person that has the first 10 years better has a 33% reduction in the risk of cardiovascular disease and a 50% reduction in the risk of renal damage. So early intervention matters, and likely, of course, this is not true only for type 1. We know that sensors that particularly Alois was fighting for in our environment work. This is the ABCD nationwide audit from the United Kingdom, demonstrating an immediate amelioration of glycemic control in the UK, not only a concomitant decrease in A1C and the GOLD score, the hypoglycemia unawareness, but also a significant improvement in the quality of life of people with diabetes. Also, the knowledge came that you need to scan a lot. You need to scan 30 times the intermittently scanned CGM in order to come close to the targets, either A1C or time in range. Same holds also for the hypoglycemia targets and the hyperglycemia target. A lot of scanning, and then yet a very beautiful success in this recent study from another part of the world, from the Australian, east of Australia. Finally, the Czechs, so our neighbors, almost neighbors here, made the first study comparing intermittently scanned CGM with real time and demonstrated that real time must have an advantage because time in range, both and time below range, was superior when real time was used. But this was a small study that was recently confirmed in this publication from Belgium in the Lancet. And here, unequivocally, the intermittently scanned CGM actually is outperformed by the real-time CGM, both in all basically CGM-derived glycemic targets, as you can see here in this violin plots for those that like raw data. The question is whether this is related to alarms, particularly predictive alarms of real time, or perhaps to the continuous visibility. CGM works also in type 2 diabetes. And the last big project that Alois had was to bring CGM to people with type 2 diabetes in our country and in the broader environment in the European Union. This study clearly demonstrates that also people treated with one insulin injection a day, with basal insulin only, CGM has a considerable advantage over blood glucose monitoring, both in time in range achievement as well as in glycated hemoglobin. That was a 0.4% difference. And in this follow-up study published a month ago, demonstrating that if you stop using it, all the benefit is lost. There is no memory or learning. You need to wear it in order to be successful. Finally, this JAMA publication demonstrated that it basically saves money. This is the Kaiser Permanente insurance system in California. And they performed analysis for type 1 and type 2 in emergency department visits or hospitalization. As you can see, both type 1 and type 2 diabetes together, a significant decrease, and also separately for type 1 and for type 2, a significant decrease in event rate, emergency department, or hospitalization, which means an immediate savings for the system. And this, I think, very impressive endeavor in the RELIEF study from France, all individuals, 74,000 people with type 1 or type 2 diabetes were included. Intermittently scanned CGM was used. As you can see here, the total amount of acute events, a reduction of 50% for type 1 and a reduction of 40% for type 2. So again, a direct proof of savings in relation to the use of CGM or intermittently scanned CGM in this particular study. Finally, perhaps for type 2, there will be an overload of data for the primary care physicians. So artificial intelligence advisors were developed here in this Nature Medicine publication. Non-inferiority was demonstrated in comparison to diabetologists, and perhaps even slight superiority. And this is now FDA cleared and CE marked for people with type 1, type 2, and also once a day insulin only type 2 diabetes. So to summarize this part, CGM and intermittently CGM significantly improve glycated hemoglobin, time in range, glucose variability, and importantly, reduces costs. Finally, the philosophy. So this important thing that we all use in diabetes has to be changed. The new way of looking at the data, please note, these two groups, it's a Joslin study in older individuals with type 1, look exactly the same glycated hemoglobin, yet a very different coefficient of variation, different glucose variability. The higher variability, the higher time below range, and the lower time in range. So we need this additional CGM-derived metrics in order to improve the outcomes in people with diabetes. The Maastricht study recalculation also related this CGM-derived metrics. Here you see coefficient of variation, here you see time in range. With the carotid femoral pulse wave velocity, a proxy marker for cardiovascular disease. As you can see here in the model 2, adjusted for all other confounders, it is significantly related to this cardiovascular risk factor. And also the mortality in this interesting study, a 12-year follow-up with only initial CGM at the beginning of the follow-up. When you divide people to different time in range percentages here, the all-cause mortality on your left-hand side, as well as cardiovascular mortality, are very strongly related to the percentage of time in range in this type 2 population. Finally, if you want, the closed-loop insulin delivery really comes close to what we want. So this is the first 4,000 users report recently published in DTT. As you can see, overall achievement of time in range is 76%. So this is above our target. And as you can see, also the time below range is way, way within the target. Particularly the nights looks like are safe and within the target range. And importantly, there is no difference between different cultures, because artificial intelligence doesn't understand culture. It only understands glycemia and looks like quite efficiently manages it. If you want to see one of our youngest patients, the persons with diabetes, the pump is registered down to 7 years. Here, very, very interesting parents. The first week, 75%, the second week already 83% in target, with a little bit below, but doesn't go below 54. Here, the learning curve, they started very cautiously with boluses for the meals, but then ended up with almost 100% of time in range very soon. And perhaps this Agnes, a 20-year-old competitive athlete biking, this is her time in range overall, around 80% over the week. And in this day, when she did the chronometer biking competition, 500 meters of elevation, here 34 kilometers. As you can see, this day was 88% of range, not a single minute in hypoglycemia. Here, during the highest heart rate, adrenaline kick raised glucose a little bit, but the system with automated bolusing nicely brought it back. So we believe that in our near future, we will see a virtual environment that will integrate perhaps even better sensors, that will become thinner, that will become lighter, that will become less visible, and perhaps even, embedded as a non-invasive monitors in our wear that we all use around us. So perhaps the knowledge about glucose will not be limited only to people with diabetes, but also to all of us, which I'm sure Alois would be very happy to see. And the areas of engagement will go into a connected care cloud that will be used by people with diabetes, healthcare professionals, but also by the insurance systems and by the hospital management systems in order to improve our diabetes care. Allow me to propose a couple of conclusions. So hyperglycemia, high glucose with people with diabetes and without diabetes is related to complications and trouble. Real-time CGM and intermittently CGM bring people closer to the targets. A1C is not enough, and this was the important fight of Alois. Evidence is mounting in support of time in range centered diabetes management, of course, particularly during this terrible pandemic. Advanced hybrid closed loop seems to be the best option currently for type 1 diabetes. And finally, what we want to see is improved long-term outcomes in all people with diabetes and hopefully reduced burden. Please join us also at the Paris ATTD meeting, the 15th meeting. IDF is always present, and we are very happy to welcome it again. With this, thank you, Alois. We miss you, and you will stay with us in our memories, whatever we do with diabetes. I thank you very much for your kind attention, and perhaps if you want, I'll be happy to discuss. Thank you again for invitation and for your kind attention.
Thank you very much today for your brilliant lecture, giving a sort of cross-sectional view on what is going on, especially with technology in diabetes and for the future perspectives. As you said, we have time for some brief questions and answers. Please, the floor is yours. Who is going to ask some questions?
Nebojsa, maybe I can ask a question to...
Of course, Maurizio.
Today, great presentation and lecture. How much do you envision to be transferable some of the data on type 1 population also to type 2 population?
I don't believe that our body can distinguish between glucose coming from type 1 or coming from type 2. The body doesn't care. Glucose is harmful, and as soon as the glucose concentration is elevated, it causes inflammation and all other troubles. So although there are, of course, important differences in between the two types, particularly with comorbidities that go with type 2 and the lifestyle issues that go with type 2, basically, glucose is as dangerous for both types. And we have several old and new studies, large studies to support this. So whatever we can learn from high or glucose variability, it's applicable to everything. Saying this, we are not lacking studies anymore in type 2 diabetes. There is very solid data coming, and I'm sure more will be. Some was presented also with GLP-1 receptor agonists and time in range, particularly time in tight target range, which is a new range in between 70 and 140 that basically returns people with type 2 diabetes within the normal range. So I think we are ahead of very exciting times, and I'm very much looking forward to continue inside our environment together with Mr. Graton and others what Alois has started.
Thank you. Any other questions? If I may have one, for years we have been focused on hypoglycemia, and as our major enemy when new technological devices are there. And now it appears to be, and a number of your lectures that I witnessed are opening a new horizon, how hyperglycemia might be, and is an important enemy, especially regarding complications. Could you just still comment a little bit more on that? Should we be more free in judging how to fight against hyperglycemia?
I had a troubling connection, so I didn't hear the last part. Would you be so kind as to repeat the last part?
I mean, could you comment or summarize again how can be more efficient and pay more attention on hyperglycemia in all this context, and focus it as our major enemy, in fact, in obtaining an optimal control?
What I suggest most of the time is that we need to know about hyperglycemia first. This is perhaps less and less of an issue in type 1 diabetes, particularly where the technologies are available, so where there is a public coverage so people can access these technologies. But then in type 2 diabetes, what we will try to do is propose a consensus guidelines that will tell that at least every 3 months, you need to do a CGM and see whether the current therapy is sufficient, and made a threshold on when to upgrade the therapy soon enough in type 2 diabetes. So to prevent this, this very slow intensification or reluctance to intensify therapy in type 2 diabetes, which may be, the major cause of all troubles that we see, like increase in amputations. It's terrible. How can we see an increase in amputations with all the new medications that we have and the technology? So I think, we need to know about glycemia. And when we know about glycemia, we should act upon.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other questions or comments?
I have an additional question, if there is time, Nebojsa.
Yes.
What do you think prevent the scientific community to push for earlier, tighter metabolic control early on in therapy?
I think, their scientific community is not a uniform body. So there are diabetologists that probably react best to the data. So the more data we generate, the more likely we will get them on board. And then, it's in type 2 diabetes, it's the very large amount of people. And of course, the general practitioners came in and they need solutions from us. They do not have time to analyze, I don't know how many days of data. They need solutions. They need artificial intelligence help that will provide decision support in what they're doing. And this is I think, the most likely way to quickly upgrade the care of type 1 diabetes on the primary care level.